What's up, guys? Back here with another Deck Daddies. Now, I have two guys from the East Coast. I'm sure a lot of you guys know these guys. They used to be a bit more proactive when game was a little bit more live pre-Corona, but definitely two very popular players that have played since the beginning of Pansy and even before. And I'll let them introduce themselves real quick. Go ahead, guys.
Hi, I am Ryan Lewis. Sometimes I'm online as Matthew Ryan. I've been around for a while, playing the game since 2001 ish, back with the original Z. So I played all through Score Z, Reezy, Pansy, and now Fanzy. I'm excited to talk about deck building and a couple other things with you guys today.
Yeah, and I'm Wayne. On Retro is the Kid Wayne. I've been playing the game since the beginning of the Score Days 2. However, back in those days, I was just a child and couldn't really play seriously and competitively, and I kind of overcompensated for that as an adult. So yeah, you probably know who I am.
Wayne is Mr. Awesome Sauce Proxy himself, isn't he?
Yeah, I am the Dende,
The Dende. That is
Dende
looking.
behind the scenes.
Yeah. Well, we'll get right into kind of the whole topic of the video, but of course we're talking about deck building, and like I said, these guys both have been around so long. Both are players that have done really well in the competitive scene. I think Wayne. I know you've topped a couple different. I know you topped a few. Didn't you top a regional or two back in Panini?
Y- Yeah, I topped a handful of regionals, a couple ARGs. I won a Kai by default down in South Kai.
Yeah.
I got a card, Black Swagger Blast.
Yeah.
Uh,
Nice.
been to a couple TOPs.
Nice. I know
You know,
Ryan. Ryan, did you top cut any of the
he didn't
regionals?
do none of that shit.
I don't want to
No.
follow that.
Okay.
My one claim, me and Didier used to have this saying that nobody from Pennsylvania ever did anything great.
Uh,
The only thing that I've ever accomplished is back in Score Z days. I won the last expanded regional in 2004 with Orange Supreme West Kai. So I've
yeah.
been running Orange since the OG days. But since then, I have topped a couple of things. A couple of the events, I came in second at a couple of North Kai regionals back in the day. A couple ARG things, I did top 16, but nothing too prevalent. Last year, not last year, 2 years ago, pre-COVID at Gen Con, I actually managed to get second with Orange Vegeta, another Orange deck.
Yeah. Nice. Well, I want to talk you guys up just a little bit because neither of you are like, I'm this such a great guy, but no, I do. These guys both have quite the credentials behind them, and I met both of them personally a few times. Really, really good guys. But so we'll start into the first question here. It's gonna be, where do you start when you're deck building? Now, some people start with MP, some people start with a mastery, some people like a certain combo or card. Ryan, where do you start when you start deck building?
Yeah, good question. I mean, there's a couple different, I think, ways to approach this. I think a lot of us are probably in the boat where we start off with an MP or a mastery. Often we see one first and then get excited because maybe we like the character or we just like the style, and then we see something else that complements that, and immediately we say, okay, this is a combo in its basic form, a two-card combo. What can I do with this? What does that style lend? What masteries might be available that could go to different styles. Like Orange could go towards Energy Beach, it could go towards Drill. You could even do a physical Orange deck. So, how does that match up with the MP that you want to use? And I would say that the majority of the time, that is the way I deck build when I see a combo like that, because the MP and the Mastery really is the heart of the deck. So it's not that you need an MP and a Mastery to win a game, but it's going to do nothing but add value to your deck the more synergy that they have. So I think I would always start off with looking at those MPs and those Masteries. But to a lesser extent, sometimes I do just see a card and I got that fanboy in me where I'm like, I need to do something with this. And sometimes it might be like I see two cards and I say, this is a combo. Can I build a deck around just these two things? Or sometimes it could just be one card, but I recognize that that card has a theme to it. Something like Mill, for example, where maybe I'm not a Mill player, but I see one card and I'm like, that's interesting. It piques my interest. This is something maybe I'm not exploring. Can I try this out and see, can I build a deck around Mill and then, kind of build the deck around that and then work in the MP and the Mastery later? Uh, but I would say more often than not, it's just when I look at an MP and a Mastery and say, is this a combination I'm familiar with? Have I done a deck like this before? And if so, can I do something? And really, I just kind of say, is it going to be better or worse than the other version? Because at the end of the day, we also want to be competitive. We play the game to win. Don't fool yourself. So, I could find out Orange Yamcha is really, really good, but I could find out Orange 19 is really, really bad. I'm going to play Orange Yamcha because 19 is not going to add anything better than Yamcha. So, I would say most of the time those are the two things that I go to, and most of the time it is just the MP and the mastery, and I say, where do we go from here? What does this lead to? So
interesting. What about you, Wayne? Where do you tend to start when you're deck building?
Well, I guess the core of the question, I do start in the MP also, but before I even look at an MP, I always look to what's good right now, what's being played, because that usually points me in the direction of the angle that I want to attack the game at. So
Prisoner's Dilemma.
yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
So like once like I identify what's good, like for example, in set 5, at one point in set 5, everyone was playing Cell. And Cell was really, really good, but he had to get to the level 2, level 3, level 4 to be effective. So okay, I say in my brain, okay, well I have to beat him fast. What are some of the good aggro decks? At that point there really were none, but Tri-Beam was just introduced. And Tien also gave you basically the guarantee to get it the first combat of the turn. So it's every game you're gonna get it, this is gonna happen, you're gonna be really like jumping down his throat. So I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'll play Tien. I'll throw in Devious for the extra, the extra assault, and we'll go from there. And I had a lot of success. There was a ton of Cell, and every time, just everyone, the Cell level 1 wasn't the most, powerful MP.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I was able to really get ahead on them, and I had a lot of success there. So I guess to answer the question, I usually start with that, and then I move to MP, and then Mastery when I'm building.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think a lot of time people don't really start with a concept like meta, for example, or maybe like, oh, I want to do a deck that does X. I want to do mill. Like most people just are super, it seems like MP mastery oriented, but that's actually, I think that's a really interesting way to look at it, especially in a competitive mindset. To just immediately think
I feel
about.
like you.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Frank. I feel like Wayne's kind of putting the competitive part a little farther ahead in the game than I am. If I'm kind of looking at the combo first, and then I go back and compare it to the meta, it seems like he's just maybe putting a little more emphasis on that earlier, which is probably more efficient in your building then, I would think.
Well, it's cool about this game is that the MPs are all so different. They all offer a bunch of different aspects of the game, which is something I think internally we all really love about the game that we don't really realize is that the MPs and their name cards offer such a different dynamic to each style that they're allowed to be played in. So I
and
think
sometimes
that
they represent us.
right. Well, no one cares about you. No one care. Not few more people care about me, but it all comes to making the game easy for you. Like it's already such a random game, just drawing 3 off the top. If you can like slice any of that off the top, then you'll just have more long-term success. That's the way that I've always approached the game. So
shooting for consistency. What would you say then, or with it, like that sounds like a consistency argument? Trying to make something.
Like if you can build some form of consistency, you should definitely do that. But you should always put yourself, I think, in the best position to like win. Like if Broly's out there going crazy, you probably don't want to like be playing an energy deck. You know what I mean? Like that sort of thing.
Okay.
Like as much as you might want to play the Yamcha,
yeah,
you shouldn't if Broly is everywhere. You know what I mean? You're just setting yourself up for a hard time.
Those are some fighting words.
I mean, you can fight. You win.
I've only ever
lose,
lost
bro.
to a Broly deck once at Yamcha, and it was top 8 at Virginia Regionals. So he stomped me.
Yeah, that's like I would call that like reactive deck building. That's I think they're the first person I've interviewed that is had that kind of philosophy. It's interesting way to look at it. So we'll go to the next question here. Do you look at the numbers? So when I say do you look at the numbers, like do you have like a certain layout? Do you say I only want this many planning cards in my deck? I only want this. I have to have this many Omni blocks, this much endurance. Is there like ratios and things involved? Go ahead, Ryan.
Yes, sorry, I want to take this one. Put me in, coach. If anybody's ever asked me for help with a deck list, they can tell you this for truth. I start off with my deck list first and foremost, and I always start off my deck list in the same exact order. It's a little OCD because when I think of my deck and I think about how I want to build my deck, the first thing I look at is what those numbers are. Like Wayne, you said about consistency. If I'm playing Android 20, I'm already accepting the risk that I'm going to have 35 planning cards, right? but that's not the norm, and other decks should not be built like that. I know if I'm playing a Namekian deck, I'm probably going to have 10 to 15 events or more, and you have to consider that, because then it's like, okay, how important are they? Am I at more risk of getting sphered? Are these vital to get through? Should I add 3 more and put my own spheres in? So, it kind of snowballs very quickly if you're not paying attention to that. When I do a deck list, I go by all the planning cards first, Dragon Balls, setups, drills, allies. Then immediately after that, I look at, okay, what are my kind of non-linear cards? And those would be my events. Things that aren't necessarily, a direct attack or a block. They're often reactive events, or they're useful in specific situations. But they're also risky because I categorize them in a separate thing because they can be sphered. So it goes back to, if I want to, use, I don't know, time. I mean, if I want to use time, it's like, is it pivotal when I use time that it needs to be successful? If it is, then I really should be considering running spheres, 1, 2, or 3. And with every card, right after I title the card, I put the endurance per card, the endurance for how many copies I'm running. And then same thing with anger. If the card gains anger, I would put, if I'm running a 1 of, I'd put in parentheses anger equals 1. But if I'm running 3 copies, I'd put like anger equals 1, plus 3, right? Because then when I total my deck
list, it sounds like you're writing this down.
Yes,
like you always do your decks on paper
on a laptop. Yep.
Okay.
So yeah, I always start either on a notepad or a laptop. And when I do this because when I get to like the first version of my draft list, I want to look at where those numbers total. If I'm trying to build an aggressive deck, let's say Imagine Vegeta Ruthless, I shouldn't be running 8, 9, even 10 planning cards because it's not going to add value. You run his name card and that's it. You don't run any other planning cards. So, and I also want to see, is my deck going to anger? Obviously, if I have an anger deck, I need anger. So there's a big difference from a Namekian Piccolo deck having 20 anger. You can win a game and get by on 20 anger because of the recycling of the cards. But if I build a deck with 42 anger, I'm going to be focused on that anger as my primary of the triple victory, and I'm going to add more consistency to that win condition. So, I want to see that right up front. When I just make that first list, I'm always on the laptop to look at the image of the card so I can write down how much endurance, how much anger it is, what card type it is. I even keep track of styled and non-styled cards in my deck lists because, there's very good cards in many styles that rely on, your next style attack is unblockable, or, your next unstyled attack is considered style, and things like that they can very easily be overlooked on how impactful they are in a game. So every little detail when I make my list, I try to write down what it adds. In my Namekian deck lists, I write down how many crits the deck can produce, from shuffling in your Dragon Balls or from Namekian Resourceful Shot.
I've never,
because
that's interesting. That's like a statistic I've never really seen people.
Right. It's weird, but
actively the fact that you actively record all these is really interesting. Like Wayne was saying,
I do
with the write down, but then it's like that one specifically is what I've never. Never. Maybe made a short note in my head of that sometimes, like when I'm playing a Dragon Ball deck, but usually like never.
When allies around my play area here in New Jersey at the comic book store, shout out, a lot of people were playing allies, and if unless you have Orange Stare or Blue Betrayal, no other deck has a I would say a perfect styled card to remove allies, right? And many decks don't have ways to recycle them even. So you look at like something like Namekian never really had a solid card to get rid of a drill or a setup or an ally. There were some cards that ended up doing the job and filling that role.
Wait, I'm just looking at Wayne's face. I'm kind of because I'm kind
He's
of smiling
a Slug player, and
too.
Slug got the best card. Slug got the best virtual card, but when I look at a Namekian deck and you think about, okay, one of my min cons is Dragon Ball. Do I want to commit to running Optic Blast? I mean, yeah, those are great, and if I'm in a mirror, it's fantastic if you have Optic Blast. But people might not know a Namekian deck can do like 9 natural crits. Yes, a lot of them are shuffling in Dragon Balls, but you can just do instant 9 crits. That's amazing to swing the game, and just with one card, I'll crit, take one of my Dragon Balls back, shuffle one of mine in, protect it, gain another anger, and I used to love as a Namekian player thinking about those things because I would only ever have 1 to 2 Dragon Balls out with knowledge. That way, they could never steal the best one, or heaven forbid they did. I would steal it back and shuffle mine in, so I'd only ever have the one in play. I would really never try to win by Dragon Ball until the very end of the game if I needed to swing that way. So I want to know all those numbers so I know what I can manipulate once you get that draft, and then you say, okay, how do we get down and tune this?
Yeah.
I went on a rant there. I apologize, but like
it was focused. I guess
one of the things so this might blow your mind too. Like along with that, I don't just record how many crits the deck can do. I have a separate counter. How many crits it can do? How many cards are specifically anti-anger? How many cards are anti-ally? So if I'm running something that, let's say I have a card like Namekian Resourceful Shot that can do a crit, I'd count that as a +1 to each of them.
Yep.
Because that crit can be used several ways. So, I want to see those things again. If I'm in a heavy ally environment in my play area, I need to be able to get rid of allies, or, I need to be able to get rid of setups and drills if I'm in an area that has a lot of orange players and drill players. So one of the things I'll also write down is, what the non-combat hate is, So if I only have 3 cards that get rid of a non-combat and I'm against orange Android 20, it's going to be a challenge for me. I know that up front. So, if I can give myself a broader range to cover some of those weaknesses that may come up during the deck building process, I just think it puts me in a better position to, get to that consistency point.
Well, you're very articulate. I absolutely appreciate it. I think there's the depth in which
I'm very passionate about that.
No, the depth in which you record the numbers. I personally don't find myself hitting that kind of level of thinking about the deck until I'm like final cut day before a tournament. Like I'm looking at the list and I'm like, how many cards do this? It's kind of like, okay, what's the meta? Do I want an answer to this thing? How good is like the recycling of that answer? Great example is the Dragon Balls. I was like smiling because I look at Wayne, he's smiling when you're talking about not having board hate. I'm like, dude, how many times did I get abused by ball 2 and 4 and like if in a game, where like ball 4 alone is like almost was enough, honestly, for the longest time for Namekian. I thought that was just a little goofy anecdote.
It's funny, dude. I record that with my Namekian decks also. How many shuffle effects I have, how many shuffles so you can recycle a deck list, things like that.
It's just the fact that like you actually record every one of them is just the wildest thing to me.
Do. I write down in my Namekian deck how many rejuvenation effects it has. How many rejuvenation effects my deck has, because I want to add that into my anger count too, because I know those are all anger triggers. I'm a little OCD, I am, but it helps calm me down during that process.
Yeah.
The thing is, the answer cards always exist for each style. It's just that no one ever wants to play the cards that they have to play. Like, there's a Namekian card that destroys everything. It's Namekian Grab from set 8. But is anyone playing it?
Well, if you're, I think you only get the kill if you're 500,000 or less.
Yeah. Isn't there? It's villains only, or it's a.
It's not. It's 500,000 or less. Yeah. So Piccolo doesn't get it.
One of the underdog cards.
No. Dude, I was running Reality Check in Piccolo for the longest time because it wasn't BAU, and I could recycle it once or twice.
I was running in Dende because I didn't want to run Focus Assault, and Reality Check is banished after use, and it kills any board card.
Anything.
So
and an attached card, yeah.
Yeah, so that's why I like that. But then Wolf came out, granted, so I just replaced one for. I was running 3 of it, so I just replaced 1 for Wolf.
The cards are there. Like I said, the cards are there, but you always find yourself either not putting them in your deck or cutting them just because they're not good every time you see them or every time you draw them. So
yeah, I think that's a fair statement. That's for sure.
Do you guys follow the common rule? I've heard this a lot, is that you should only ever run 3 of a card if you want to see it in your opening hand. I've heard that a lot, and I've heard very different arguments about that. Me and DTA have gone back and forth about that in the past. I don't believe that. I'm a firm believer that if a card is good and it's purposeful in a deck, then I think even a 1-of can make a big, big difference. I'm not saying a 1-of will win the game all the time.
Like an extra copy? Or are you seeing like an extra copy?
Yes,
singular copy.
Or like in my Yamcha deck, just for example, there's 3 cards I run 1 copy of because they're not BAU, they're orange energy attacks, and Yamcha can recycle them with his level 2, right?
Yeah.
So I can get away with running them as a 1-of, but I like, instead of running 3 copies of 1 card, I like a little less consistency to give me those 3 different options in different games. So I can get away with things like that.
I always played by the rules that I'm running 3 of them. If every time I draw it, I like seeing it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, if I like seeing it every time I draw it, then I'm playing three of them. Like for instance, if I'm playing OP Saiyan and I draw Chest Blast, I love seeing that card every time I get it.
Yep.
So
Yeah. Hmm.
All right.
That's interesting. Yeah, no, I don't hear that one super often. I think I kind of have that mentality personally with a do I want to see it, but instead of like first turn, I see it as like do I want to see it early game,
Yeah.
and not so much every time because like a block, for example, like a physical block, crap in like
Yep.
the Yamcha matchup, 18 matchup, you're not going to use it. Versus energy block, you're not going to use it in the Broly matchup, or you're not going to use,
Yep.
insert X whatever matchup you have, but. So that's interesting. That's interesting. I don't feel that quite as extreme on that. As far as like the singular copies, two copies even, it's like if I'm in a deck that can loop something, if it's not a banish after use card, it's a deck that can recycle,
Mhm.
then sure I can. That's when I can start. That's when I actively might try to knock some stuff down to two, but I only do that if I really feel like I need to fit an answer. And in the case that we were just talking about Reality Check is a card that you can run as a singular of, and it covers so many positions. So like because of cards like I tend to find myself running cards with that are multifaceted utility cards
Yeah.
because
More
I
options.
yeah I like the idea even if it's weak damage or doesn't necessarily synergize uh, as like say one of the other board cards for Namekian might board clearing cards might the fact that it just frees me up deck slots uh, because it does so much. I prefer to run cards like that personally. They tend to be freestyle cards, but that has its own obviously negative ramifications
Yeah.
by picking freestyle cards. So that's just me personally um, with that one. We've talked about a bunch about the Ryan's stuff. Don't not to cut Ryan off here. Wayne, I'm more curious about do you find is there like a number scheme, number strategy, ratio strategy for you when you build decks?
yeah, I similar to Ryan, I predominantly write my list in paper. After I've already established what I want to do and where I want to be, I usually start around like 11 or 12 blocks, and that's just like three of each one, and then time usually brings me like 12, 13. But I always at the top of the paper I write three things every time. I write what the strengths of my deck, what's the strength of my deck, what's the weakness of my deck, and how I want to win. From there, I put all the staples, the cards that are considered staples for the style and the deck I'm playing. Like I'll add the name cards, I'll add the time, I usually add Conquer or Stare Down just because I usually always play those cards. And then once I've established that, every single card I add to the deck, I usually check the three things and make sure that it hits at least, one or two of those things before I add it in. And after I add it in, I also record the endurance to each card, the anger, or if it's lowering anger, those three things. And then I usually just go from there. And usually every card in the deck is efficient. And then from there, once I have the list compiled, I'll play it, and when I play it, I'm paying really close attention the first couple of times I play to the cards that feel weak, and then I'll
What were those
remove
three
the
things
cards
again,
that feel
Wayne?
weak. The three things: the strength of the
Oh,
deck, the
that you
weakness
write
of
on
the
the top.
deck, yeah, strength of the deck, weakness of the deck, and how I'm going to win.
Hmm.
I'm going to steal that. I've never done
No,
that,
that's
and
really
that sounds
I really
it.
like that.
It sounds obvious. I don't know why I didn't think about it.
Because it keeps you from putting like stupid cards in your deck. Like for instance, like I used to like playing black decks, and I'm trying to get back to that, right? But black usually has a hard time controlling anger, so I'm like, all right, I need to. I'm looking. I was like, all right, anger's weak. What can I add to make my anger stronger? Oh, here's control energy blast. That card's amazing.
Hmm.
Like, ooh, who would be amazing with this card? Oh, let me add set seven Vegeta. Ooh, now this card is doing seven. It lowers anger two, and it might turn anger off for the rest of the game. This is an amazing card in
Spicy.
this deck that I'm playing. You know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
I might just grab like what is that card called? Energize Strike. Only does three shuffles back in. They can only gain anger from. But again, it's really good with Vegeta. It's going to do five instead of three. Now it's threatening crit. Maybe I'll play Conflict. Yeah, I'll play Conflict since all my cards are getting boosted by this Vegeta deck. Oh yeah, this is really coming together.
So when you're
What's
writing
the
this,
strength of it?
so when
No, go ahead.
you're writing the strength and the weakness, right? Are you
Mm-hmm.
creating the strength and weakness purely from like an MP mastery combination sense before you like actually build the deck? You're just saying, hey, my MP is good with mastery because of this reason. You're not
Mm-hmm.
thinking, you're not like going like, oh, the card pool already because it sounds like you start pretty small with the strength and
Yeah,
weakness.
yeah. Yeah, you pretty much like you said, you base it off your MP, your style, and what you've been seeing, I guess. well, less of the third, more of the first two.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, if you're playing a black deck, you know you're going to be weak to A, B, and C. If you're playing Roshi, then you know you're going to be kind of soft to aggro, like those sort of things.
Yeah.
So like you'll just like note those three things at the top, so that way you have a quick reference to every time you think like you might have like your octagon open and you're going through the available cards and you're like, all right, I'm considering this card. Let me look at the top three. Does it hit any of those boxes? Ooh, it hits two of the three boxes. This card is probably really good. Let me add three of these. Oh, it only hits one of these boxes for the next card. Maybe I'll just try two and see how that works. That sort of thing. And then once you have the list you have compiled, you've already like had all your staples added to the deck, so you don't have to worry about that. You've chosen the best cards you think are good. Now you're checking your stats as far as endurance goes, because remember we've logged it next to each card. So now I'm seeing how many endurance I have over how many cards. Depending on what I'm doing is like where I land as far as how comfortable I am with having the endurance count that I have. Like for instance, if I'm playing a Dragon Ball deck, I want it high. Not only do I want it high, I want it across at least 25 cards in the deck. If I'm not so much worried about that, then I don't really care. I remember Frank, you did one of these a while ago with Joey, and he's like, I don't care about endurance, and that kind of just
That
blew my
was
mind.
yeah.
And didn't it? Like I was watching your face, I was like, that's kind
Yeah.
of crazy way to think about it. But I knew that A, it's Joey. B, he has success all the time, so there must be some truth to it. So it kind of like made me loosen up with my endurance count sometimes, and
Yeah.
as long as you're not playing Dragon Balls, you're pretty cool with just like because you get to play the more powerful cards. The more powerful cards are the ones that don't have endurance, typically.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
Can I
usually
share
how
a funny
I.
story with that real quick? So you mentioned something, Wayne, that I think is very, very important. I did
Mhm.
not realize this until maybe like set 6, I'll be honest. I only looked at the total endurance count. I
Mhm.
never actually looked at the ratio of how many cards that was split amongst. So when you look,
Right.
I think I saw a deck list somewhere where somebody built an idiot Broly blue deck that had this blue cards that had 4 and 10 endurance each, and it was like
Yeah.
it was a deck that did nothing, but it had 170 endurance, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I looked at
I
endurance
know where this is
before, I
going.
was only looking at the total count, and I didn't think about, in a lot of ways, 2 cards with endurance 2 is better than having 1 card with endurance 4. Like it really is,
Mhm.
because you can almost absorb 6 damage instead of 5, and you also, if they do something that only does 2 damage, you're not wasting that extra 3 endurance on thin air. So uh, somebody told me that around like set 6, and I actually started looking at those numbers, and that's why now when I do my lists, I count how many endurance per card, how many total endurance, and how many total cards with endurance.
Mhm.
It's just
Yeah.
a
Once
lot of
once
people
I'm
I don't
finished
think
adding
understand that.
once I'm finished adding all the cards, I added up and I put on the bottom. I said X endurance over however many cards it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
found it's more important how many cards have endurance versus how much, just because
how much
Yeah.
it
a
is.
bunch of cards
Right.
with one
It almost
endurance
is.
tends to be better than like you said. I love that you're not because you're not the only person that's mentioned that is like
Yeah.
they're like, oh, I was watching X video with Joey, and it's like it's funny because multiple people have said that the exact thing to me, like he said like fuck endurance, and I was like, oh my, and then they're like,
It's like what?
and everyone's come to me, not everyone, but so many people have. I love that. I love that people for one, it's hey, people watch, but it's just I love that everyone's just like Joey's just like big brain and everybody apparently but just does not care about endurance. That's just hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah.
I,
It's absolutely insane.
yeah. Well, that's really
But
interesting. I think you guys, those are some really interesting answers. You guys are very like analytical, more so than most. Like in terms of like actually like writing all these numbers and things down. It's just so like you get so deep into
Yeah.
it. That's
I feel like it's an East Coast thing, and I'm not trying to like say the
no,
East
no,
Coast West Coast thing, but the West Coast is good, right? But I
yeah,
think they're just like they just play a lot to the point like they know how to be good, but like they might not plan as much as we do over here. We like tend to like be more analytical, like you said.
um, Ty Tracy said a very similar thing. He said that Kelly was very like the analytical planning. That's how you guys all are. He said all the East Coast. He said about the East Coast guys, and he's like we're just like a lot more like it's a lot loose. It is a lot looser. Actually, I did a thing with Ty Tracy and Derek. Both California, and if you
Hmm.
check that one out, they are just entirely like the way that they play. Like you're talking about meta Wayne and how that
Hmm.
affects your deck choice, right? Where there is
Hmm.
like they're like regularly like we just constantly rotate decks, just and Ty's like I literally want to be able to play everything, so I play everything, and I'm just like Like
That
just
would drive me. That would
he,
drive me up a wall.
he's like they apparently they do a format where they don't play a deck more than 3 wins. Like once you win 3 times with it, you have to change the deck.
What?
Yeah,
That's the Wild West. That's crazy.
it's so wild, and it's just like
Sounds dope though.
versus like you guys are like super planned out, like playing the meta stuff, serious stuff. You
Yeah.
have to run X card because it's good meta. Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Versus they're like, yeah, whatever, you know. And then it's like, come the tournament time, they're just like, okay, here's a deck, you know. Kind of. I thought that was just hilarious. Like that is just.
Can I just tell you a tangent for a second? I always wanted
ahead.
to do a DBZ format like that, like a team thing where it was 2-on-2 or 3v3 like Magic, and have a rule where you can't have, you can't use the same MP more than once, the same style more than once.
Yep.
Right. So it puts some restrictions on your 3 specific different decks. I wish we could have gotten something like that in DBZ, even if it was in an informal way. Something like that would have been cool.
I did like the regional brawl with that. The as much of a mess as was running that was and trying to get everybody coordinated for that. That was a real pain in the butt. But that was the whole intent. It's like everybody, 6 players from each region, different MP, different mastery. I think promoting that kind of diversity, especially in like some team oriented way, I think would be really good for the game. So
they did that a little bit at the ARG events back in the day, where they had like 3 teams of 3.
yeah.
So
I don't know if they were. Did they have any I did play in one of those. Did they? I don't think. Did they have any sort of restriction on what you could play though? It wasn't like.
no, it was just like
3.
it was just like your team of 3 versus another
Yeah.
team of 3, and whoever's if 2 people from your team won, then you guys advanced or you got the win for that. That's all it was.
Yeah, I did play in one of those. I didn't think there was any sort of restriction. I think they would be really good with restriction though.
Was there any team who just ran 3 carbon copy decks just to be that team?
I don't know.
There's got to be one.
It's like a blur. It's like those were like it was like really early. It was like set 3, set 4. So I imagine there was a lot of Krillin.
I'd just be annoyed if you sit across from like 3 Resolute Gokus, and I'm just like, really?
Yeah.
Not really, man. I don't know.
Yeah,
I have my own thoughts on Goku.
Yeah. Oh, Goku. So we're gonna move on to the next question, Wayne. I'm gonna have you answer first this time. So what kind of decks do you prefer to build? Is there a theme in your decks? Is there just an archetype that you like? Is there really no theme at all? Do you just build whatever?
No, there definitely tends to be a theme. I don't like being controlled, so I tend to play like faster decks or decks that take away some element of the other player's control. In the beginning, I started playing Black Krillin just because I am like a huge fan of Krillin as a character, and he just so happened to be very good. But after that, Piccolo always gave me a hard time. And then Orange 20 used to come out of nowhere, and that was a real like slow, grindy, oppressive kind of play style that I hated losing to. And there's members of my play group that played those type of decks. I'm here with Savage and Ryan, the Dennises, and they play all those like slow, grindy, oppressive, just like make you like, I can't believe I'm taking free time out of my day to sit here and let you do this to me. And I was never a fan of that. So I was like, all right, well, the weakness to those decks is you got to get into them fast. And that's when I started playing TN. And I had a bunch of success there. And I played that into Lord Slug. And we win really quick. They weren't always aggro decks. It's just like, I'm either going to play a deck that's going to kill you fast or that's going to win in another way very, very quickly. So you don't get to get your engine going. So those are the type of decks you usually find myself playing. The TNs, the Kid Trunkses, the Slugs, like that type of thing.
Nice.
Dude, your Kid Trunks deck was lit, Wayne.
It was cool. It was cool in like a competitive scene, just because like they literally couldn't do anything. I wrote an article a long time ago because at the time I was playing that deck. One of my friends, Sabbath, he was playing Bobbity deck, and I wrote this article. It was like you can't block drills and you can't like skip mills or some shit like that. It was talking about.
I do remember.
It was talking about like if you play the deck, like there are 3 ways to win in this game. However, you can kind of like massage the game into a way where like you're kind of taking an element from your opponent that they can't plan for. Like if I'm milling you, you can't block that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If I'm skipping you, at the time there wasn't much anti-skip like hate. So like if I'm skipping you, there's not really much you can do about it. So I was like, if you attack the game from different angles like that, you'll be able to like get into a pocket where like not a lot of people are at and put you in a better place. So to answer your question, Frank, those are the type of decks I like playing. I like playing either aggro or mid-range decks. Personally.
I'm personally very much the same way. I was a huge TN fan. Like I said, 2, 3. Then I took a break. Then Tri-Beam came out, and I played him a little bit in Perfection. I really liked Enraged and Empowered Vegeta because you just sit there and you're just trying to gain anger and get to 3 as quick as possible and kill somebody in level 3 combat.
Like the villain Vegeta?
Yeah, villain Vegeta. Yeah.
Okay.
It was a ton of fun.
Mm.
So yeah, I totally get that. I totally like that. Just like the less time for your opponent to just kind of be able to screw with your game plan. Like it was like, especially because those early sets like Black Krillin was pretty crazy.
Mm-hmm.
The making Piccolo was just like drop the balls, kill your game plan, loop whatever ball it needs to kill your game plan.
Yeah.
Stuff like
And
that. So.
it makes you feel rewarding, like fair almost as a player, because it's like I'm not winning in a cheesy way. Like I'm fighting you. Like we sat here to fight,
Yeah.
and I came to fight you, and you didn't come to fight me, and now you're paying because of that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because there's some like ways you could play. Like when I played Kid Trunks, I kind of felt that way, but I felt more cheesy because they didn't get an action. You know what I mean? But if I
It's that
come in there and I'm like,
non-interactive.
yeah, if I'm like tri beam, now you get to do something. Oh, you didn't do anything. Okay, tri beam. Then I feel good at the end of it. You know what I
But
mean?
to you, that's fair. To
That's the
the
thing.
person on the other end, that's not always fair.
Well, they get a chance to do something. You know, I didn't tell them to play 15 setups. I didn't tell them to play 20 drills. You know what I mean? They did that.
That's fair.
So
That's funny.
that's all.
Funny. Ryan, what about you?
I'm afraid to answer.
Oh.
I have the exact opposite way of approaching this as a Wayne does.
Yeah.
So, I mean, way back since Score Z, my first deck was Orange Trunk Saga Android 19. My first deck and my last deck in this game will be Orange. To this day, I don't think I've looked at any of the virtual sets cards that were not Orange, Namekian, Blue, or Freestyle. And this is also my biggest weakness in the game. I know that because I just need to be a little more open-minded and explore the other styles, but I've just always gravitated towards Orange as my primary, and then as a close second, Namekian, and then Blue. And that's really the only colors I've looked at in my entire legacy, if you will, in DBZ. So
yeah, I was thinking you played the Red Roshi at Gen Con, the expanded format. I remember you made it like the day before or something like that.
Yeah. So I've actually been dabbling in red a little bit more, but not in the traditional way.
You'd be surprised. I keep a fair amount of what everybody does up in here. That I guess I read posts.
I'm glad. Yeah,
it's impressive.
Yeah.
You
Dude, that was an amazing deck.
Too.
That was an amazing deck. I had to lose the DDA in the finals, but nobody thought that deck because we just completely rules lawyered it. When Roshi, at that point, to your point, Wayne, when you enter the game and draw 3 random cards, at that point, Roshi was looking and stacking the top 10 cards when entering combat. It was broke.
Yeah.
But I have been dabbling in red actually a little bit. What was that?
I can't believe that card's not limit 1.
Yeah.
Are you talking about Slumber? Or
yeah,
that card is pretty sick.
But I've been dabbling in red a little bit in the last, I'd say, few years, but I'm still a newbie, if you will, in red. I always will go towards orange. And it's not because of drills. I actually like energy beats as my first play style. So I'll usually look at the orange energy attacks when I look at like new sets as they release. And then that's kind of where I start. And I say, hey, is this something I can add to one of my orange decks in rotation, or do I want to build a new one around this? And then I basically do the same thing, go through the Namekian cards and say, does this, I've maintained a Piccolo Namekian deck since set 1. So it's like, is this going to add value to that deck or not? Is it worth me even exploring a deck around this? Okay, nope. I go through the same thing with blue, and then I immediately go to all the freestyle cards because I guess at a higher level, when I look at my deck building, I look at the new sets as they release, and the first thing I do is look to see what new cards add to my current deck roster.
Yeah.
So I don't even go to see, I don't look for what can I build something new right off the bat. The first thing I do is look at the cards with the context of what can this add to my existing decks. And after I kind of do that round, then I'll go back and I'll say, okay, do I want to put effort into exploring this combo or this idea? But I always look at those styles first. And then after that, I would look at the MPs and the personalities. And I just go from there. And, like I said, I know that's one of my weaknesses because I don't know enough about the other cards. So when talking about like the meta and, in a lot of ways, when you sit down across somebody with an MP and opponent, you're in a very good position if you have an idea what their strategy is. kind of to reverse Wayne's list, if you can sit across from somebody and immediately tell how they want to win, how they're going to beat you, what their strength in doing that is, and what their weakness is that you can exploit, you're probably be in a good position to approach that match. So that's always been one of my weaknesses, because I really just look at those styles. That's my comfort zone, and lock myself into that.
Is there a reason why you only take those three styles? Is there like something about them specifically? They don't, because they're not entirely related.
They're not. No. I've had an orange, Namekian, and blue deck since Score Z. Like literally, Android Saga in Score Z when I started that game. And I don't know. Maybe it's just a weird OCD thing. The color palette.
It's not
I guess.
OCD, dog. Those are just the
No?
easiest styles to play. Yeah,
Oh,
the red and black decks tend to be a little bit harder to play. I don't blame you.
Black is complicated. I have tried black a couple of times, and I have not been able to make progress with my deck building in a black style.
You got to give that nod to red too. Really? You said you dabbled in red.
I've dabbled in red recently, and red energy beats though. The last chance qualifier at Worlds, I did play Ruthless Goku, and in hindsight, I should have just played Resolute Goku. But
Frank, what do you think about red? Do you think red is like one of the more brainy styles to pilot, or no?
Oh man.
I think red has a lot of options.
I think there's a lot of place, like things have to be in the right place for red.
Yeah.
If you just rely on that to just happen, you're not going to have as much success as if you
I think, so I was going to say specifically, I'm thinking Ruthless. Okay, so I didn't even say commanding. You throw commanding in the same kind of loop as as Ruthless, but I don't think any of them are actually as face rolly as you think. Like maybe Ruthless, if you pick a certain MP, sure, you can kind of say that it's really singular, but even then it's like there's actually well, yeah, like Evolution Turles comes out, or Evolution came out, Ruthless comes out, whatever, blah blah blah. Insert face roll deck, but even like Tien, Ruthless, or like I was thinking specifically like from my experience against playing Ascension Trunks, right? Against it too, it's not mindless. There's actually like there's a lot. I think red, in order to maximize, has a lot of like you really need to sequence properly, like probably more so than any other style. So like while its card pool doesn't have a ton of powerhouse cards per se, it's just more the fact of the order of sequencing is incredibly important to fit in. Whereas like blue, for example, has a bunch of tutor cards. Orange, bunch of tutor cards. Namekian, you're generally really reliant on drawing Dragon Balls. And
keep rejuven.
And you have the rejuve too, but like as far as the combo powerhouses have worked that way, red is more like I have to sequence perfectly, properly. So I think there's a lot of thinking involved in it. Even outside of
Frank, I would add to that, Frank.
Sounds like a yes.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's actually more intelligent than like Orange and Namekian, and I'd say blue too, because blue is really and there's no cards in blue that require like major thinking in my mind. Like they're all like, here's a block, here's I lower your thing at best, or here's I get a tutor, and that's like all blue is to me. Like it's tutor and attack, tutor and ally, I block. That's like blue in a nutshell. Whereas like red's like I can do this, but only if I have this anger, but I have to skip to do this, and then it's kind of a gamble to this. I have to deck build this way because every one of the masters wants styled stuff, whereas like blue is like super forgiving. I feel like black is really interesting because black is like me and Shane were talking. Black has the most cards that like if you see them, they're just game flippers. They have such powerhouse cards, but none of them synergize whatsoever. So like black is kind of like I don't want like black is so interesting because it's like there's the control aspect of black, which is skillful and brainy, but then there's also just like the just complete powerhouse factor of like how good the cards are can kind of like they don't necessarily have like luck per se, but like they're just such powerhouses in themselves, I'm trying to think of how that relates. I'm not doing a great job of entirely tying that to the other styles, but
no, because it's like you were saying that like we're saying that red and black I think are harder to pilot, and I think that if you go the more brainy route, or if you go like the big route like you're talking about, the cards don't synergize. So now you're tasked with having to find a way to make the cards that don't synergize work in 60 card house. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
And I was just going to add, circle back to red and something you were saying, Frank, about the sequencing.
Yeah.
In my opinion, red also has a lot of what I would consider non-standard triggers. Like when you look at like the mastery that triggers, banishing a card and that triggers, so it gives you a resource, but also takes a resource away. And then you also have to remember at the end of combat, I've never played against an Ascension player who has not at least one time in the game forgot that end of combat anger, right? Yeah, you did it last week, Wayne. Yeah, you did it. But
number one trigger I'd probably miss in the game is Saiyan Outrage.
Yeah.
End of combat grab a trash card. You'll play it like if you play it like first card, second card in combat, you have these long ass combats with Saiyan, like chain leveling back in like a Power Days or whatever, and just like don't even remember it. Don't even.
You got a red mastery now that triggers when your drills leaves play. It's like how often depending on how you build your deck, how often you're going to be leveling and remember that, and you have to do it in a specific order because that can also impact your sequencing. So it gets wonky.
See, that's where again playing in paper kind of like gives you another leg up, because when you have a trigger like that, as soon as you play the card, as soon as you play the catalyst to the trigger that's going to happen later, I'm putting something on top of my deck so I remember.
Yeah.
Can't do that on Octagon.
Yeah. Well, like look at like black playing what the heck's the drill? Absorption drill. Like that card's a nightmare to have to do online. There's so many cards that I literally don't play because doing it on the computer is a pain in the butt.
To this day,
What's up?
I don't play Enhanced Broly online just because of that, Frank.
Yeah.
I'm super excited about that deck. I built it months and months and months ago. I was like, I refuse to play this deck online. Too many triggers.
Yeah, it's just like,
I can't remember Orange Mastery trigger. I've been playing it since that one. I can't remember the trigger. So now what I do to remember if I trigger it, I put it in my hand until the end of combat.
That's fair. I know a fair amount of people like leave cards out that, especially their banish shifties or something, could just leave them on the table by their MP or something like that, Yeah. And that's definitely a little bit. That is definitely good. I think it's a really good conversation point. A little off topic, but very good conversation point. I think that was really something that was fun to. That was really fun to address. I enjoyed the conversation about it. So let's see. We've talked about the themes and stuff. So we'll get on to the next question, Wayne. Here. What do you think you could work on for your deck building?
I think that playing more casually or having a more casual mindset might, add to like my ability to build decks better, because like I have the bad habit of like if a new MP comes out and let's say this is an MP that like throws energies. I'm gonna look at it and be like, all right, this MP is trying to thrive off throwing energies. Is it better than Android 18? No. I throw it out the window. I never look at it again. So like I don't even get the chance to like build a deck and see like, okay, what kind of intricacies does this have with like other cards that other MPs don't have? Like I don't even get that far, because I've already established that this card is not as good as the card that we have, and thus me playing with it and building with it is wasting my time. I'm not gonna do it. So I think that if I can get out of that habit, then I think I would be able to like come up with some really fun and innovative stuff. But I never really get that far. So.
Do you feel some of that attitude kind of comes with maybe competitive? Sure, but do you think some of that kind of comes with a lack of maybe time, or desire, maybe, to like have to go test a deck?
This is a little embarrassing, but yeah, I think it does play a part. But I think like the major contributing factor is the people that I play with. I do not want to lose to them. They are the worst people to lose to. Like you don't want to lose to Kelly. You don't want to lose to fucking Ryan because he's never gonna stop talking. You don't want to lose to DDA. Like the play group that I play with, like they're great guys, but they pop a lot of trash, and I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. That's why like testing on Octagon is cool, because I can test with the guys that like I know that are cool, but I don't get to see that much. Yeah. So then when I do get to see the guys that I get to see, I'm able to.
I feel you on that one.
You know what I mean?
There's some people I absolutely loathe losing to. So I totally get that one. That's funny. And I do have people. Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, so I think that's like the main factor why like I don't play around in different sandboxes as much as I should. So.
Yeah. You guys are all holding Wayne back. I blame.
Let me live, Ryan.
So Ryan, what about you, man? What is something you feel like you could work on?
I mean, I'll just I just mentioned this. I won't take too much time, but I think my biggest issue with my deck building is that I pigeonhole myself in certain styles because I'm comfortable with them, or in certain MPs when I find something I just think I like, I just attach to it. Like I said, I have Piccolo Namekian since set 1. I have Orange Yamcha since set 4. I do have a Resolute Goku in my rotation that I've had since set 7, and I don't intend to ever take those decks apart. And I just feel like those are going to be consistent decks that I go back to and styles that I go back to. But I understand that. I think, like Wayne was saying, it limits my ability because I'm not even exploring those other styles or other MPs. If I know that, I don't know, Tau. I don't know if I know that Tau is the best in black, right, from Mill. I don't play black, so I'll just by default never play Tau because in the back of my head, I'm just telling myself blue Tau is not as good as black Tau, or something like that. It's just an excuse for me to talk myself out of not exploring that and just sticking with what I'm comfortable with. So that's definitely my challenge. It's just something I need to work through because I just think it's going to make me a better player and better deck builder if I understand, some of those opponents better, some of those other strategies better. So
Interesting.
If I'm playing devil's advocate, though, I think there's power in that, though. Like if there's like 3 decks that you've been on for like years and years and years, you eventually start to develop superpowers with that deck that no one else is going to have. You usually grow like a level of familiarity with the deck that like you'll be able to see things before they even happen, before your opponent even considers that that's possible to do in the game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and that comes from just grinding a deck over years and years and years in time. So there's power in that too. It's not all bad.
And I'll say the best I've ever done in any competitive nature has been with decks that I didn't think were best decks at the time, but they were the decks that I was most comfortable with, going into that event at the time. But it's funny, yeah, like you just, there's lines that you see without thinking because it becomes like second nature. A lot of people think a deck like Roshi or like, well, I can't do Roshi, but a lot of people think a deck like Yamcha is hard because, the pace of the game and the tempo can change so quickly. But playing Yamcha since he's been out in a style that does change the tempo like Orange so quickly like that, I'm not going to be arrogant, but I think I can see those lines better than somebody who didn't play that deck or is not comfortable with that play style. So, I can think a move or two ahead. Do I want to end combat or not when I hit his name card? And it's just like right away, I know if that combat is not going to be successful for me, or if I'm going to do one thing and he's going to do 3 things, like to Wayne's point, he's going to unload his hand and attack me, come at me, bro. Is it worth it for me to do that one thing for him or not? Like, I'll know right away if I need to end combat and just hit the eject button. So you get that familiarity over time.
And not only that, in the competitive setting, also, people haven't tested for you. People are testing for what people are playing. If you've been playing the same thing for years and years and years,
I love
that.
Yes.
And it's not popular, they sit down from across from you and they don't know what the fuck to do. They don't know if they should keep their foot on the gas. They don't know if they should throttle back. They don't know what to do, which is another advantage for you. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I never liked playing the most popular deck going into a tournament. I always liked playing, the deck that was hunting or was built to hunt the decks that are popular. So don't feel bad, Ryan. You're in a good spot. Trust me.
Thanks, bro.
Oh, that's interesting. It's interesting. Both of you kind of mentioned that you feel maybe like it's not the comfort almost, but it's you feel pigeonholed in maybe just your personal preferences. That's interesting. That's interesting. How similar you guys are on opposite ends, of course. A lot of the stuff that you guys have answered, you're like on the opposite ends of each other between play style, and such. But like again, similar in aspects. That's really interesting. I suppose coming from the same play group. So we'll kind of move on to the final question here. I'll let either one of you guys that wants to go first can answer this one. Is ever a little bit more enthusiastic, but I always ask people, what is a deck building win and a deck building fail? So, something that worked better than maybe you anticipated or just ended up being, amazing that you built versus maybe something that just kind of like, completely disappointed you, like maybe good concept, terrible, once you actually put it in practice.
You want to go first, Ryan?
All right. So
you can say no.
Yeah, no, I'll go first. Ladies first. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. No, I think. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes actually. Yeah, I took notes. There's a couple of things I think to this. For me personally, I think there's a couple different personalities when I'm playing the game that I kind of go through, kind of depending on the day, depending on the tournament, and depending on my mood. But I think one of the things for me that's I consider a huge win is, if I'm in a game and, I pull something that is only a 1 of in my deck, or maybe a 2 of, but it's something that like is not necessarily in my deck for consistency's sake, but I find it at the right time that helps me win the game. Like I'm not talking some magical silver bullet necessarily, but like, like you find that reality check because that's really your only counter card for the opponent, right? And it happens to be what you need when you need it. So, as luck based as that might be, I think it does come down to, your deck building, because I'm a firm believer that even one card can make a big difference in a deck. Maybe not necessarily on the overall consistency if it's only a one of, but even that one option I think can help you seal up a potential weakness, or it can add to your win condition in a different way. So when you get that, I think the feeling of like seeing that line of play is just amazing, and for me, that's the number one win. The other thing for me, I would say that is a big win is, and this is kind of a theory thing, but
You got two wins.
Yeah, I got two wins. Two things for me that are big. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
This is different perspective though.
Okay.
I'm not going to claim this. I actually heard this from Phil McGrath way back in old Score Z. But it's something that actually, when I heard it, I was like, oh my God, this is it. Like, so it goes something like this, right? So when you're in an event and you're talking about the metagame, and this goes back to like what you were talking about earlier, Wayne, you look at the metagame and let's just say that it's obvious what the best deck is, right? Let's say Resolute Goku. And there's a couple of different strategies then you can approach that with, and you can say, okay, that's the best deck, I'm going to play that. Or you can look at it like a prisoner's dilemma game, and you can say, well, there's going to be a lot of people playing Blue Goku. How do I think there was an event in Texas where like 15 of the top 16 were Namekian Piccolo because everyone was afraid to build a new deck style. Same principle, it's just like, so do you play the deck that is going to be good, or do you take the risk that a lot of people are going to do that and you build what we call the anti-deck? Logic would dictate if the obvious win deck is, Resolute Goku, then you build the anti-deck to that, Retribution Roshi, right? And that person should, in a vacuum, win that event. But then if you take it a step farther, and this is something Phil said, is if you want to win, you don't play the deck, you don't play the anti-deck, you play the anti-anti-deck. And you be that dark horse because you figure if you can get, essentially, this is not statistical in any way, but if you get to the end, the assumption there is that the anti-deck will take out the deck, and it's only going to be you and the anti-deck left, and you're the anti-anti-deck, so you will beat them in the end. And I do have one example of this.
Here we go.
And it's
Thank
very, very
God.
All the build, all the
right.
Thank God.
I know, right? And
Let's go.
you guys are going to hate
all the
this
ball
example.
fondling
So,
that happened prior to this moment right here.
So there's one clear example, and this is like the white buffalo of the game, right? But there's one example, and this is a Score Z example. So for those old players like myself, at a certain point in the game, believe it or not, Namekian Piccolo was the best deck also in Score Z, right? This is right around the year that Dustin Morbito won Worlds that year. So Namekian Piccolo was the clear Energy Beats deck. It was the biggest deck. It was winning every regional. It was often top 10 out of top 16. Then this Roshi guy came along. And Roshi could use Cosmic Backlash to randomly win anytime he wanted to. And he could also ball out. And if he was only playing against the 1 through 3 MP, he could anger out. So Roshi came in and said, okay, I'm going to be the anti-deck and beat Piccolo. And then Roshi started winning a lot of things. And then there was one event with Josh Man, and he played somewhere in the down south around like Georgia, Alabama, somewhere. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. No, you know what? Yes, it was Sengoku. It was Nationals in Ohio.
Yep.
And he played Sengoku, and the Sengoku deck, the only design in the deck was to survive against Namekian Piccolo, and he was playing a ridiculous, dumb MP at the time. It was a starter deck Goku MP that could just banish 7 in his discard pile to gain 6 anger and level, and he played only 3 levels. So his entire design was just survive Namekian Piccolo, and then 1 through 3 anger Roshi. You just need to pass, fill up your graveyard, banish 14 cards to instantly level. And I believe at the time they had to make an errata too, because you could actually combo his level 1 off his level 2 off his level 1.
Yep.
It wasn't a once per combat deal. So you could literally go from level 1 to win the game when entering combat. And then the opponent couldn't interact with it because it was when entering combat. So that is the one soulless example I have of this, but it sets the kind of precedent here, if you want to just surprise people and just come out of nowhere and just blow shit up, like you play the anti deck. And I've never experienced that. I don't know if anybody else has. I hope they have, but Josh Man did win nationals with it.
The question was supposed to be, what was your? So if you've never experienced that,
Hey, well, okay. My first part of the answer is when I run a one of and I pull that, and I'm just like,
That
okay,
I'll,
maybe this wasn't the purpose of why I put this card in the deck, but you see that line of play and you're like, amazing. I've experienced that a bunch of times because I run a lot of one ofs or two ofs.
yeah.
So that's my personal experience.
Uh,
But
I mean, I always love good old Scorsese history reads because I definitely read the article that he had that Josh had put up. Yeah. Well, I'll say this: the actual on-topic answer was really interesting because everybody always talks specifically about a deck, but you talking about the fact that just the fact that you run one-ofs. It goes back
yeah,
to your answer earlier. The fact that you run one-ofs and they work out. I think that's a really cool answer. I've never had an answer
I
like that
want that
before.
moment in the game to
Yeah.
help me look back and be like, I was successfull here right now, and
Mm.
this is the moment.
Yeah.
So
The
I hate
conceptual
that.
the
That
conceptual
feels
answer.
that feels lucky to me.
Oh boy. Well, anyway, if everyone's still there after the I mean,
Tired.
I'm giving you shit. I mean, I love it.
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh my god.
He
But
talks.
I love
He's
it though. I
Ryan. He
mean, I
I
love
talks.
am
it.
my biggest fan.
I
So
love it. I love it in
Yeah.
the DBZ after hours, of course, the long combos. But so Wayne, assuming that you still remember the question, or what was the deck building win and deck building fail for you?
All right, I got 2 wins too. You know, what, I guess I'll talk about the wins
You can
first.
have you can whoop, you can have two. You can have
They
two.
won't. Even my two won't be as long as one of his wins. So I promise you that. So the first one
Yeah.
was I was at Worlds for set 7, and Draku was really popular. And prior to this, this was the last chance tournament I was about to go into. Right, so here I am. I played in the tournament on the day prior, and I played Slug. It was my first like real go at Slug, and I was like, "There's something here, but I can't do this by tomorrow." So I'm assessing what happened. I just got my ass kicked by Goku all day, and I was like, "All right, so here's this blue deck, right? That's drawing all these cards, that's getting to level 4 and just doing whatever the fuck he wants to do." So I'm like, "All right, well, I need to stop him from leveling. How can I do that?" Well, I could take the leveling cards away. What is he using to level? He's using like Unleashed and things of that nature, right? So I'm like,
okay,
all
okay.
right, well, that puts me in the black. So now I have to hate these cards out. What black deck is good right now that does that? None. I can't show up with Krillin. Krillin hasn't worked in quite a while, right? So I'm like, all right, well, I also want to stop him from like really gaining anger. There's this card, Energize Strike, and that put me into the Vegeta box. I'm like, oh wow, with this, I could use Vegeta's ability to banish whatever I want every combat. I get the boost on all the cards that are going to hit him really hard, and I can play Black Reflection to literally cherry pick and play whatever I want that I can banish on command from my MP. I played that in the tournament and I did really well, and it felt really good beating Goku with Vegeta. It was like really like
Yeah.
because no one likes Goku, everyone loves Vegeta, and everyone wants to see Vegeta get his moment. So that was a cool time, and it was at Worlds. I ended up like bubbling out. I think I ended at like 17 or 18, so I just missed it. It was
Mm.
very upsetting. But that deck going forward, I played that deck for months, and it was a lot of fun. No one was playing it. It
Conflict
was great.
Vegeta, right? Yeah.
Right, right, right. Conflict Vegeta was like super dope, and it was like a hard counter to Goku that no one knew about, and it was just like super cool because I was the only one doing it, and that is the coolest moment in DBZ Kids when you're playing a deck that's very, very successful, and you're the only one doing it, and people look at you as the guy who started that thing. It's the best feeling in the world, and that brings me to my second moment. Look at me, Segway King, Segway King. Brings me to my slug. I'm the slug guy, right? So I show up in Fanzy with the slug deck that really no one knew anything what to do with, and I'm like, yo, this is super consistent. It's
Yeah.
gonna win every time. Ended up winning some tournament at CBS. I don't think it was a Kai, but it was like a money tournament or something. I ended
It
up
might have been the
beating
Dennis
Meckler.
one. It wasn't one of the Dennis ones though.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because
I ended up winning the Dennis one.
I think I was there when you were running it. You're running Radiant Slug. Was it Radiant
Yeah,
Slug? Yeah.
yeah. I show up with this Radiant Slug deck, and I'm like, not. It's weird. I never showed up to a tournament, first of all, and like not been like 100% sure on the deck I was playing, except for this day. I was like, I don't care what sits across from me. I'm going to win because they can't kill me. Like it was a really survival heavy meta, but I had like almost like 80 endurance over my deck over like 45 cards.
Yeah.
And I have several cards. I was like, no one's going to kill me today. And no one's going to capture my balls because I had all these cards that stop my ball capture. And I just felt super comfortable all day. I was real charismatic. And I think I lost like one game. And they played like a what's that red card that everything like just crits you?
Oh,
They got
shoulder
one of those
grab.
knee lift.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Knee lift for shoulder grab. Yeah, they got a shoulder grab combat off and they got me. But those two times, super dope. Fail. New York Regional, years and years and years ago, around like set 3 meta, there was a lot of board, set 4 actually. There was a lot of board. I got the bright idea. I was going to play Cell and Perceptive because Cell's for level 1 attack is styled. So I'm like, ooh, yeah, I'm going to blow up everything.
Set 5.
And
Yeah.
I'm going to play, and I'm going to play Black Defensive Burst. And yeah, they're not going to be able to do shit to me. And I'm going to recur it. If there's a card that were like, lets you rejuve, I was like, as soon as I play it, I'm going to rejuve it. And I'm just going to grind them out.
Oh, the
And
black wilts. I know what you're talking about.
Yep. I was like, yo, and I played well enough to almost win every single game that day.
You are
Like I was within.
I'm gonna say
was
you're a
within 10
legend
cards
for
every time.
throwing black wilts in a deck and actually winning a game.
I almost won every game that like it was infuriating, and it was like the same feeling from the slug at set 7 because like I knew that there was something here, but I just hadn't quite cracked the code yet. So
Oh,
that
wait a
was a
minute.
deck fail because
Not to keep interrupting. Black, was it the board kill one out of their deck? Or is it a different one?
No, it was like because I knew I wanted to keep recurring the energy web and the defensive burst. There's a card from like set 3 or something that lets you like rejuve 3 cards. And
Oh,
There's one you can rejuve 3, the opponent rejuves.
Berry Destruction. Okay. I'm like,
yeah,
you said the
shit.
rejuve, and I'm like, oh, is he talking about wilt, the one that you +1 your mill and that it goes to your bottom? And I'm like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
that doesn't make. You could run
Nah,
that,
man.
but I'm like, come on, I know you're not that.
Oh my god! Like it was like the best idea ever. Like as far as like a deck theory.
Yeah.
But it's just like I just almost won every game. I ended up like just barely losing like almost every game. So
That's wild. I can't believe. Yeah.
didn't feel good.
I remember trying to make like Perceptive Cell back then. I was like thinking it would be good, and just like.
Yeah. Hurts. It hurts me.
On the topic of that Berry Destruction card, I was looking at the black cards again recently. There's like Black Fist Catch, which is like a rejuve. It's the same kind of effect. It's like rejuve. Your opponent chooses 3 from your pile, you rejuve them. You choose 3 from their pile, and they rejuve them. And I was like, the only time I've ever ran this card is like a sealed. I did a sealed event on the release, and then my buddy Mike Teagues did a cube, DBZ cube, and we drafted out of that, and I ended up with that out of that. That's the only times I've ever.
That is so fun, by the way, kids. Like if you're like finding like yourself bored with the game right now, just make your own cube, like a draft cube, where like you can play like whatever MP with whatever style. Like you end up having a lot of fun if you build the cube right. You can't put any busted MPs in the cube.
There's a little bit of house rule where it's like, I think there's a couple cards that they specify specific styles, and we just kind of say like rainbow across the board, like anything that says. Like I think like
Style.
Empowered Mastery or something, or some card. There's a few cards that specifically say those specific style. We just said rainbow for all those effects, but otherwise, or like red X. I think red X heel kick or whatever, or red heel kick. Red X heel kick's the score name, I think.
Yep.
I have an old one. Maybe I'll touch it up, put it out so everybody can have a little bit of fun with it.
Cube
Yeah, like we always had like a bunch of fun every time we played it. We didn't get to play it a bunch of times, but like it was always a good experience.
Hopefully we can do it again.
So
when DA Cardword was selling a bunch of their cards, I bought way too much of a sealed product, hoping that one day if we have kids, we can try to pass this game along.
Look at you thinking about legacy.
I know, right?
You really do be planning things. That's crazy.
Kick open those drafts.
Well, that's a really nice way to end it, though. I think the legacy, going forward, like I've definitely thought a lot about, we've had the fan format continuing, and people jokingly will talk about Z3 or whatever, and especially with this like coronavirus year, I definitely think that we were talking a little bit about it before, and that definitely took a toll on the community. So thinking about the future, as far as whether it'll be for a while, foreseeable future, it's going to be just purely retro form or virtual format, but eventually maybe it'll get rebooted or there'll be a new Z whatever version game.
Shout out to Chris Kreisman, because he's got some shit going on over there that is like what you're describing, Frank. It's like if you if you love the game's engine, but it's like, yo, they're kind of like a little bit too ramped up. Yo, try what Kreisman's got going on over
Project
there, because whew, man, same game, different feel.
Have you been playing Project Z? Were you in that tournament that he did, the World Martial Arts, or you just kind of been?
I wasn't, but I've been lurking for like months. I've been lurking for months. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna make my presence known, just not yet.
I made a nailed deck list video. I have a bunch of decks I gotta update, but I ran like a
Mhm.
I ran like a red Vegeta in his World Martial Arts tournament. And then I made a green nail deck that I've been really wanting to play lately. But yeah, that's a great format. That's a great continuation. It really took the best things I think of Pansy Fancy, but the
Mhm.
format speed is like the speed we were talking about. Wayne and I were talking
Mhm.
about set 5 a bit, and the speed of the game is set 5, and like that's kind of the speed of Project Z. It's like very much like I don't know, like pre-Vengeance, pre-Awakening set like Panini speed, where it's like the games like can be like a little slow at times depending on the deck, but it's like
Yeah.
none of them are like just blow out like games over
It
too.
has time to develop, right?
Yeah, it has time to you have time to play around each other, and there's a back and forth to it.
Right.
And that's just a really just I love Project Z. I've been dabbling in it here and there for like a year, and it's been
Mhm.
yeah. I'm totally for that shout out. That's what I'm trying to say. You should definitely
Yeah, bro.
get it,
Seriously.
play some time.
Cool.
Seriously.
Yeah. But with that, I'll wrap up the video here. I really appreciate both of you guys. I've been messaging Wayne forever. I've been wanting to do a video profile with him forever. Because I really think that he plays a lot of unique decks. He's known. I mean, of course, you're known for like playing specifically like Tien Krillin, Slug.
Mhm.
And
My
I know
wheelhouse.
Ryan is always, he appears in a couple events here and there in the random Diddy videos. But I know, big Namekian Piccolo player, and like you said, Orange. I feel like I don't know if you were on Orange Krillin in the early sets, were you? I know you had one friend or two that played Orange Krillin.
Yeah,
Yeah. We had
Mike.
a friend Mike who played Orange Krillin. I played Orange Ginyu until I switched over eventually to
Piccolo.
Yamcha
Yamcha,
back
yep.
in the day. But
Yeah, and
Piccolo.
I feel like there was one other
Very
deck
Piccolo player.
I'm not remembering that you played as well. But I knew you were
Very
always playing Knowledge
uh,
Piccolo.
Exactly.
that was the big one.
Would kind of
Ginyu,
dodge that shit.
and
Own
then
own your shit, bro. You played Piccolo.
what?
You're one of those.
I played Piccolo. I
Own it.
played Piccolo in the best meta of
All
Piccolo,
right,
and I
but
did the
don't
best
just
Yeah.
at
gloss over like
Northgard.
you didn't do it. You did it. I was there. I
I did
synced
it.
you. I
I
synced
did
it.
it. I was the only Piccolo Namekian player playing 3 wall breakers, 3 hurried quest, and 3 dev blows.
Pure
And
animal.
I played 7 rounds that
Like,
day, and you know what? I
3
won
hurried
6
quests is just too
rounds.
much. Ugh.
The 7th round I tied
mm-hmm.
Tim, but it was insane because people always forgot hurried quest. You could bounce their own balls, and it's
Mm.
like,
You ain't
okay,
gotta
I
tell
can't
me.
capture. I
You
can't
ain't
capture
gotta
that
tell
last one.
me.
I'm going to bounce it to your hand, and I'm just going to play mine.
Yeah.
I've been trying to tell Frank
Who's
about
the
Hurry
sucker?
Quest for like a year.
Yeah.
I
Right?
can't
When you're in your Dende mode.
with Dende I can't justify it. I like inheritance with him because I'm always bouncing mine out
Mm-hmm.
of play. That's my only because just the way I play with my build especially I play really aggressive. So like if I was a slower player, I'd probably because I usually never let more than 2 stack on the table is my problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's why I personally don't use it. But anyway, uh,
Anyway,
we'll keep talking here, but I will cut
yes.
off the video here, guys. I really appreciate both of you, Ryan Lewis and of course
Yeah.
Wayne Bettis.
Cool.
You guys are awesome. I really appreciate it all. Thanks.